Chapter 4, Breathless. School was always going to be hard. Hard because there were just so many things I wanted to do, but just could not do or join in. From kindergarten through to grade 3, I had to sit still and not get involved with the other kids in the playground. I was not allowed to run around or get excited. Not entirely, you understand. But as you now know, there were good reasons for this. The first of these happened in grade 1 at my local school at St. Columbkille's Corrimal. St. Columbkille's was my daily foray into the outside world. Accompanied by my nearest brother Mark, who attended the senior class at the same school. Every weekday Mark would walk with me to and from the school on the hill on the Prince's Highway. It was the start of a close relationship that endures to this day. Uphill, again. Although only 7 at the time, I remember seeing a film of the 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games being shown at the local cinema. My class, along with the whole school, was organized to go and see this wondrous event. Remember, this was well before most Australians had a TV. Our teacher, Sister Christine, primed us with a talk about who did what and some of the various sports in the Olympics. That, and of course, the Australian champions we could expect to see. We were all very excited, and not just about seeing the film but going on a class excursion like the big kids did. Walking down the hill from my school to the cinema, I was fine and able to keep up with the others. However, walking back after the showing was a different matter. I soon became out of breath and fell behind and became a little frightened as the class and my teacher, Sister Christine, drew further and further away from me. When she realized I was not with the class, she looked back to find me there in the distance, gasping for breath. She rushed back in her heavy brown serge habit to find me breathless and terrified. Gathering me up in her arms, she carried me through the traffic across the street to where her convent was, handing me in a gasping, disorientated state to the first nun she could find before racing back to her anxious class, still under the watch of one of the older children. In those few short minutes, anything could have happened. Sister Christine sent the class back to school before hurrying back to the convent. It was hard to tell who was more out of breath, Sister Christine or me. Distressed and struggling as I was, I remember the women discussing whether they should call my mother to come and collect me. Realizing that I was stabilizing and that there was no guarantee my mother would be able to find transport, they decided to stick with plan A, that of letting me rest. Which I did in due course. When they were satisfied I had recovered sufficiently, one of the nuns escorted me back to school. It was somewhat of a treat for me as well. I had never before tasted Milo, as at home we only ever had cocoa. So as my breathing returned, I began to enjoy the fuss. Keeping an eye. The excursion had been a massive wake-up call for the teachers, regarding the severity of my condition. For me as well. I loved school and being part of the class, but from that time on, the teachers monitored me continually. The school adopted a strict code of practice when it came to any activity that I might be involved in. Even the simplest and closely monitored activities could cause me problems. You just never knew. So, it was almost inevitable that it would happen again, and the following year it did. There was a small quadrangle out the front of our classroom where Sister Josie, my grade 2 teacher, would get the class to do some clapping and skipping exercises as an unwinding activity. It just so happened on this particular day, I chose to join in. I soon found myself gasping for breath and overwhelmed by the stress of the exercise. It frightened the life out of poor Sister Josie. Partly because of the suddenness of my loss of breath and partly because she had never seen me have one of my attacks. She quickly stopped the activity and brought me into the classroom, sitting me down until I regained my breath. Unkind and hurtful. With each episode it became more and more apparent that I was not going to get any better. My condition would only deteriorate as I grew older, with my growing body requiring more and more oxygen to function. What stays with me to this day is the look of terror on my teachers' faces when I couldn't get enough breath. But there was something else. By grade 2 I was the kid deemed to be different, weak, or inferior. As a result I acquired some very unkind and hurtful nicknames. I became the kid you had to stay away from because, hey, you never know, I might stop breathing and keel over. Nobody wanted to be there when that happened. My playmates never said as much, but being a friend of mine came with a certain degree of risk. At school it was one thing. Out of school another entirely. No one wanted the responsibility. It was only as I got older that I began to appreciate their dilemma. What other option was there? Simply, I needed to be kept under constant observation and the observation of my family. The world and I just had to accept that my taking it easy, staying calm was for the best for all concerned. Whenever I got frustrated or rebelled a little by starting to run around, there was always someone there to pull me back in line. I don't know if I ever thought that I would die. At that age a child has really no concept of such things. Nonetheless, I knew from the look on people's faces, whenever I became breathless and distressed, just how serious my condition was. My family understood it all too well. They sensed the divide that existed between the rest of the world and their 8-year-old boy. I was starting to feel it too. It was almost a fear that created an ever-present awkward uncertainty and brought with it a kind of social isolation. The same isolation a person with a life-threatening condition knows. It surrounded my family, as much as it surrounded me. For 8 years my poor little heart was never more than a breath or a word away from the thoughts of my family, my friends, and teachers. The angels could not come soon enough. First of my angels. My mother and father knew of him, but only by word of mouth. However, he was in the home of many Australians, as were his products. He was an old-fashioned self-made man. Ingenious, focused, hardworking, and a true visionary. He designed and built refrigerators in Australia. It had made him one of Australia's richest men. He was also one of the country's most philanthropic. Downright generous. Like his products, his money was life-changing. His name was Edward Hallstrom. He was already famous for the amount of money he had pumped into the Taronga Zoo on the foreshores of Sydney Harbour. His vision and energy and devotion to living creatures was already legendary. His other passion was for medicine. It began with his keen involvement in medical research and in particular the development of hospitals. He endowed a fellowship in cardiology at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in 1948. Then in 1949, he established and funded the Hallstrom Institute of Cardiology. He was the first of my angels, but I would never meet him. Without his benevolence, my parents would never have been able to afford the operation. Not only that, but there would never have been the concentration of knowledge and research, of skills and teamwork, of personnel and resources at Royal Prince Alfred. What we know today as RPA. It would have been a very different life, or death, for many hundreds of others who got their second chance at life. Children and adults alike. For so many parents and children, families and friends, Sir Edward was an earth angel long before the phrase was ever coined. My other angel came from the land of the long white cloud. His name was Dr. Rowan Nix. He was one of the first cardiothoracic specialists in New Zealand and Australia. He came to Australia at the invitation of the two Hallstrom initiatives at Royal Prince Alfred. In 1956 he was appointed as a staff specialist in cardiothoracic surgery at RPA. He would become the driving force in groundbreaking open-heart surgery in New South Wales in 1957. He later became involved in the development of the first automatic cardiac pacemaker. Of these, the first of my angels, he was the one I would get to know and thank. Not today, May. At 2 p.m. Wednesday, the 3rd of August 1958, my father came knocking at the door of my classroom. I was 8 years old and in grade 2. Sister Josie summoned me to the door telling me that Dad was here to take me home. Normally I would have been overjoyed to see him, but my mood was muted by a sense of foreboding. After all, in those days your father only ever came to the school when things were serious. Walking back to the car, Dad told me that he and Mum had received a telegram from RPA and I was to be admitted to hospital the next day. Only 2 weeks prior to that time I had undergone preliminary tests to evaluate my health and condition for open-heart surgery. Something in its infancy in 1958, involving a high degree of risk and chance. When I arrived home, my mother and Della Birchall, her neighbour and close friend, were busy organising and preparing for an early start the following morning to Sydney, some 52 miles away. As Mum would later explain it, she was washing when the telegram arrived. The effect of its contents was immediate. She and Dad knew the hospital would be in contact with them in due course, but like most momentous things in life, anticipating them is one thing, dealing with them is something entirely different. Mum said, the news that I was to be admitted and operated on so soon caught her unprepared emotionally. She told me she went weak and started to panic. That too was unexpected and right out of character. She rushed inside and grabbed her house key and went straight to Della's house, just a little ways down the road. There, with tears in her eyes, she tried to regain her composure. She and Della talked it over for about half an hour or so, Mum drawing on her friend's strength and calm manner. Della did what any woman worth her salt would do in those days when confronted with a crisis. She put on the kettle and they had a cuppa. After that, Della advised that action was what was needed, and so with Mum they returned to our house and began washing and ironing and preparing for the trip to Sydney, as well as absence from the house for a week or more. And that's where I found them when I came home from school. 2 friends working in our house together. A scene all the kids in Rotherhithe Road were familiar with. That's the ways things were back then. All in to help out. We were to travel by steam train. For an 8-year-old that was excitement enough. I couldn't wait. But for Mum and Dad the journey held an entirely different prospect. My operation had precedent. There had been a dozen or so performed in Australia by 1958. The problem was, as they knew all too well, that not many children survived the 4 hours of surgery. Heart surgery was big news back then. Now of course it's an everyday event. Except for the patients. We all woke early the next morning. Mum, my 2 younger sisters, Colleen and Frances, and me, the patient-to-be. All of us getting ready for the big adventure, travelling to Sydney by steam train. Veronica as always helping Mum by getting Colleen and Frances ready. Frances being a toddler needing more direction than Colleen and I. Mum had booked a cab the night before with Mr. Hunt, a neighbour and local cab driver. Before the cab arrived, Della came over with her last words of support and encouragement for Mum. She pitched in as always and helped Veronica with the breakfast. It was, however, Mrs. Hunt, not her husband, that pulled up in the taxi that morning. My brothers waited on the veranda, as we were loaded into the cab by Mum and Della. There in the brief minute or two all kinds of emotions were on display. My brothers looking on from the veranda, unsure just what to do or say. Knowing they may never see me again. Some were at high school, so they understood it all better than I did. Veronica accompanied us to the cab, with hugs and best wishes, but she too was starting to get teary with Mum. Mrs. Hunt gave us all the time we needed and then drew our attention to matters at hand. There was a train to catch. Everybody ready? We nodded and the cab pulled away. Arriving at the station, Mum reached for her purse, but Mrs. Hunt said, "Not today, May. This one's on Rex and me. All our good wishes go with you." So we waited on the platform at Corrimal Station. 3 kids with jitters in their legs and 2 somber parents making last-minute small talk and reminders. Dad had gone to work early so he could have some time to see us off at the station. Both tried their best to keep a lid on the future and their emotions. Dad with his enthusiasm and care, Mum her emotions in check with her stoic presence. Dad was great. Knowing our excitement, he joined in with, "A great day for a steam train to Sydney, kids. Say hi for me to Nana. Have a few rides on the trams. You'll have so much to see and do. Now be good for your mother and I'll see you Sunday." He crouched down and gave us each a warm hug. It was all in keeping with the man. At least that's how it seemed to us kids, his ever-dependable happy spirit. The station was familiar territory for us, because Dad worked nearby at the Corrimal Coke Works. But today was different. This time we would not see each other until Sunday. He must have wondered if he would ever see me at all. but for us 3 children it certainly was going to be different. And we loved going anywhere by train. But this train would take us north, not south. If anyone had asked me then why I was going to Sydney, I couldn't have told them anything than that I was going to hospital. At that moment nothing much else mattered, just 3 young children having an outing with their mother on a steam train to Sydney. Yes, it was August and a cold wet winter's day. But it mattered not to 3 wide-eyed youngsters eager to see all the sights the journey had to offer. Boarding the carriage we shared none of our parents' anxiety, just the thrill of the trip. Anticipation can be a blessing and a curse, and looking back at my father's face it certainly was, as we waved him goodbye from the window of our carriage. Traveling on such a cold grey rainy day and to see the light slowly spreading across the eastern sky was truly something. At one point early in the journey I remember opening the carriage window and looking out to get a face full of soot from the smoke. Stunned, I drew my head in. My mother, unpacking breakfast, reprimanded me, "A good idea not to do that again, Phil, you'll get very sore eyes." Still dismayed by the experience I took heed. Sydney was still 2 hours away and there was so much more to see. My grandmother met us at Central Station. From there we then walked down to Railway Square and caught a tram to Missenden Road. Mum and I then walked a short 10-minute walk up to Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, while Nana took my 2 sisters the rest of the way to her home in Leichhardt. It would be my mother's base while I was recovering. On the way up to RPA, Mum stopped in at a small Catholic church adjacent to the hospital. Her intention, to pay a visit as she described it. She lit a candle, knelt down and said a prayer for me to survive the ordeal I was about to undergo. The prayer, she said, was the decade of the Rosary. Throughout her life she never stopped praying for her family, no matter where they were in the world. It was so much part of the fabric of the woman we knew and loved. Family snapshots, and my sister, Veronica Ann. Being the younger of my 2 older sisters, Veronica got the nickname of Bub. She is the sister that I have the most memories of as a young child. Veronica was exceptional in the way she so capably looked after her young charges. For someone so young she had an almost adult way about her. A little virtuous but very endearing. She was indeed Mum's little helper. A family role she lovingly embraced in the early days, caring for her 3 youngest siblings, me, Colleen and Frances. As Mum's right-hand girl, she assumed a somewhat autocratic role in the management of the males in her family, including Dad. And she needed to. It was a trait that would stand her in good stead in later life. As a young teenager she became a no-nonsense style of person, assuming a matriarchal role in the pecking order of siblings. Unfortunately, all the chores fell to Veronica when Mum was caught up with other things. This too would have a profound effect on her as she grew older. So while she organized the ironing, washing, and cooking, her friends were out playing sport and socializing. And it was Veronica too who had to endure the arguments that my parents often had. In a house like ours, with so much going on and so little money, disagreements and stress were as inevitable as sunset. Mum later regretted the pressure and responsibility she laid on her second eldest girl. Particularly when Veronica left school and started working. My mother's expectations and the reliance on Bub did not let up. To me it wasn't fair because my older brothers seemed to get off lightly with their chores and what they were expected to do. But for us, the 3 youngest in the house, Bub was a godsend. She above all others was the one who took me under her wing before and after my heart surgery. To Colleen, Fran, and I she remains to this day, truly cherished.